Honoring your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. This is a conversation about authenticity, self-trust, and coming home to myself. Hi, I'm Star Delta 9, and today I want to talk about something that sounds simple on the surface, but in practice may be one of the most difficult things I've ever had to learn to do. Honor my truth, even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it was inconvenient, even when it disappointed people, and when it challenged everything I had believed about myself. Because there's one thing I've learned throughout this healing journey, it's that many of us were never taught how to tell the truth to ourselves. We were taught how to be agreeable. We were taught how to be polite. We were taught how to be helpful. We were taught how to understand. We were taught how to be forgiving, but very few of us were taught how to sit quietly with ourselves and ask, what is the truth for me? What is true for me right now? Not what should be true. Not what everyone else wants to be true. Not what my family expects to be true. Not what my partner hopes is true. Not what my spiritual beliefs say should be true, but actually true for me in this moment. This question can surprisingly feel uncomfortable. I know it did for me, because truth has a way of dismantling illusion. Truth doesn't negotiate. Truth doesn't perform. Truth doesn't need approval. Truth simply is. Often, when we discover is that we have spent years talking ourselves out of our own knowing. Have you ever noticed that feeling? That quiet voice inside that says, this relationship doesn't feel healthy, or this situation doesn't feel right. I don't feel respected. I'm exhausted. I'm hurt. I'm angry. Hell, I'm lonely, or I'm just pretending. And almost immediately another voice appears. The voice of conditioning, the voice that says you're overreacting, you're too sensitive. Give them another chance. Maybe you're being selfish. Maybe that's not so bad. Maybe you're expecting too much. Well, many years I trusted that second voice more than I trusted myself. I think many of us do, because somewhere along the way, we learned that our feelings couldn't be trusted. Maybe they were dismissed. Maybe they were minimized. Maybe they were criticized. Maybe they were ignored. And over time, we learned, I know I did, to disconnect from my own internal compass. I learned to seek validation outside myself. But here's what I discovered, that my body often knows long before the mind was what to admit. The body knows. The body knows when we're unsafe. The body knows when we're betraying ourselves. The body knows when we're settling. The body knows when we're carrying resentment. The body really knows when we're saying yes when we mean no. The body knows when we're even pretending, and yet so much of our suffering comes from arguing with what we already know. Not because we're weak, not because we're broken, but because truth often asks something of us. If I admit this relationship is unhealthy, then what? If I admit I'm unhappy, then what? If I admit I'm exhausted, then what? If I admit I've outgrown a role or a belief or a job or even a version of myself, then what's going to happen? Truth's uncomfortable because it frequently requires change. And change feels threatening to the nervous system, even positive change. The familiar feels safe, safer than the unknown. And even when the familiar hurts. So which is why so many people stay in situations far longer than serves them. Not because they don't want to know, but because they do know. And they're afraid of what that knowing is going to require of them. I remember thinking that awakening would make life easier, that somehow awareness would eliminate discomfort. What I've found is quite the opposite. Awareness doesn't always remove discomfort. Awareness often increases it, because now we can see what we previously ignored. We could feel what we previously avoided. We can no longer pretend we do not know. And yet this discomfort is sacred, because discomfort is often the doorway to transformation. The caterpillar, the transformation is uncomfortable. Growth's uncomfortable. Healing is uncomfortable. Setting boundaries is uncomfortable. Speaking honestly is uncomfortable. Walking away is uncomfortable. Staying can even be uncomfortable. Life sometimes itself is uncomfortable. The question becomes, which discomfort serves my growth? Because there is discomfort in abandoning yourself, and there is discomfort in honoring yourself. One leads to suffering and the other leads to freedom. I've discovered that honoring my truth doesn't always mean making dramatic decisions. Sometimes honoring my truth simply means acknowledging what is. It means saying, I'm hurt, I'm disappointed, I'm grieving, I'm angry, and I'm afraid, and I'm not going to try to fix it. And it's without trying to spiritualize it, without trying to explain it away, or just allow myself to just be honest, because healing begins where honesty begins, not where perfection begins, not where positivity begins, not where understanding begins. Honesty. And perhaps that is why authenticity feels so powerful. Authenticity isn't becoming someone new. It's removing everything that isn't you. It's releasing the masks, the roles, the performances, the coping strategies, the identities that you have created to survive, right? Even eventually, all of that will remain is the genuine self, and that self may not please everyone. That self may disappoint people. That self may challenge old dynamics. That self may outgrow old relationships. But that's safe. That is real. That is the self. That is real. And there is a tremendous peace in living a life that is real. Not perfect, not polished, not approved by everybody. Real. If there's one thing I hope to take away from this conversation I've had with you today, and that you do as well, is that your truth matters. Your experiences matter. Your feelings matter. Your intuition matters. Your inner knowing matters. And you do not need permission to honor what you know to be true, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to stop abandoning ourselves and finally come home to our voice, home to our wisdom, home to our truth, and home to ourselves. If this message resonates with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Has there ever been a time when you knew the truth but were afraid to honor it? What happened when you finally listened to yourself? Let's create a conversation where honesty is welcome and authenticity can be celebrated. Until then, I hope you have a lovely day, and I wish you peace and happiness. I'm Star Delta 9. Namaste.